Dust Creek wasn't much to look at. A handful of dusty buildings huddled together like scared rabbits under the scorching sun. But Daisy Bell, with her bright red dress and even brighter smile, brought a spark to the place. Folks often underestimated her. They saw a pretty face and a quick laugh, but Daisy had a mind sharper than any poker cheats. She worked at the Golden Nugget Saloon, pouring whiskey and listening close. The Nugget was where the big shots came to brag and boast. Ranchers, miners, and sometimes even railroad men. Daisy knew how to handle them all. A wink here, a playful jab there, and they'd spill their secrets like water from a leaky bucket. She'd seen enough shady deals go down to know that Dust Creek was about to change, and not for the better if she didn't do something. Daisy wasn't born in a saloon, but she'd made it her school. She learned to read faces, to hear the truth behind the lies, and to spot a con a mile away. She knew this town, knew the farmers who scratched a living from the hard earth. And she wasn't about to let some city slickers steal their land out from under them. No, sir. Daisy Bell had other plans. It was a Tuesday night, usually slow, but a couple of fancy suits had rolled into the Golden Nugget, their pockets lined with more money than Daisy had seen in her life. Mr. Harding, a stout man with a walrus mustache, and Mr. Sterling, tall and thin as a rail, ordered the most expensive whiskey in the house. Daisy, as always, was quick with a smile and a refill. They settled into a corner booth, their voices low but carrying easily in a mostly empty saloon. Daisy pretended to polish glasses behind the bar, her ears perked like a prairie dog. "These farmers are too stubborn," Harding grumbled, swirling his whiskey. "They won't sell at a reasonable price." Sterling chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Reasonable? Harding, we're building a railroad. We don't do reasonable. We convince them, one way or another." Daisy's blood ran cold. She knew what convince meant in their world. Foreclosures, threats, maybe even worse. They were talking about the Miller family, the Johnsons, Old Man Hemlock, good, honest people who'd worked their land for generations. Harding outlined their plan to create a water shortage, driving the farmers to desperation and forcing them to sell their land for next to nothing. Daisy gripped the glass in her hand so tightly she thought it would shatter. She had to do something. Daisy slammed the glass down, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. She couldn't stand by and watch those men ruin lives. It wasn't just about the land. It was about the people, their homes, their dreams. A fire ignited in her belly, hotter than the desert sun. She knew taking on Harding and Sterling was like wrestling a bear, but she couldn't live with herself if she did nothing. She glanced around the saloon, her mind already racing. How could a saloon girl possibly fight two powerful railroad tycoons? She didn't have money or influence, but she had something else. She knew Dust Creek. She knew its secrets, its back roads, and the people who lived there, and she knew how to play a part. That night, after the last customer stumbled out, Daisy sat at a table, a bottle of ink and a stack of paper before her. She started making a list: land plots, water rights, anyone who might be willing to help. This wasn't just about stopping Harding and Sterling. It was about turning the tables on them, using their own greed against them. Daisy knew this was a dangerous game, one with high stakes. But she was ready to play. The farmers of Dust Creek were counting on her. The next morning, Daisy started her information-gathering mission. First stop, old Mr. Abernathy, the town's record keeper. He was a fussy man, more comfortable with dusty books than people, but Daisy knew how to get him talking. A little flattery about his penmanship, a question about the oldest land claim in Dust Creek, and he was soon happily lost in a world of deeds and mortgages. While he rambled, Daisy subtly steered the conversation towards the plots Harding and Sterling were interested in. Abernathy, bless his heart, even showed her the railroad's initial survey maps, tucked away in a back room. She memorized every detail: key water sources, the most fertile land, and the farmers who were most vulnerable. Next, she needed hard evidence. She knew Harding kept detailed ledgers of his dealings in a locked strongbox in his hotel room. That night, under the cover of darkness, Daisy slipped into the hotel, her heart pounding like a drum. Using a hairpin and a steady hand, She picked the lock on Harding's door and crept inside. The room was dimly lit by a single candle. She found a strong box tucked under the bed. It took some time, but eventually she got it open. Inside were the ledgers, filled with incriminating details of their scheme. Daisy carefully copied the most important pages, her mind racing, knowing that if she were caught, this could be the end of her. Now that Daisy had the information, she needed a way to use it. She couldn't just walk into town hall and buy Upland as Daisy Bell, saloon girl. Harding and Sterling would see right through it. She needed a disguise, a new identity. The next day, a well-dressed gentleman arrived in Dust Creek. He called himself Mr. Theodore Blackwood, an investor from back east. He wore a smart tweed suit, spectacles perched on his nose, and carried a leather briefcase that looked important. His voice was low and measured, his manner polite but firm. No one suspected that Mr. Blackwood was really Daisy Bell, cleverly disguised with padding, a fake mustache, and a voice she'd practiced for hours. Mr. Blackwood visited the land office and quietly began buying up parcels of land, focusing on the key areas identified in Harding's ledgers: the land around the main water source, the access points to the richest soil. He paid in cash, no questions asked. The land agent was delighted. He saw Mr. Blackwood as a godsend, a wealthy outsider injecting money into their struggling town. Little did he know, Mr. Blackwood was about to turn Dust Creek upside down. Daisy, as Mr. Blackwood, made sure to leave a trail of vague stories about a new mining venture, hoping to further confuse Harding and Sterling. Daisy, as Mr. Blackwood, was making progress, but she knew she couldn't do this alone. She needed allies, people she could trust. Her first recruit was Jebediah, a former surveyor for the railroad. Jebediah had been fired after questioning Harding's shady practices. He was bitter, but he also knew the land like the back of his hand. "Mr. Blackwood," Jebediah said, squinting at Daisy's disguise, "I know who you really are, Daisy Bell, and I'm in." He offered invaluable insight into the railroad's long-term plans and potential weaknesses. Her second ally was a Native American guide named Walks with the Wind. He knew the desert's secrets, the hidden springs, and the ancient trails that no map showed. He distrusted the white man, but he saw the greed in Harding and Sterling's eyes and knew they would destroy the land. Daisy convinced him that she wanted to protect the land and its people, and he agreed to help guide her through the complex web of water rights and tribal claims. With Jebediah's knowledge and Walks with the Wind's guidance, Daisy felt a surge of hope. She was no longer just a saloon girl playing a dangerous game. She was a force to be reckoned with, backed by people who believe in her cause. The odds were still stacked against her, but now she had a fighting chance. Harding and Sterling were starting to get nervous. Land prices were skyrocketing, and some of the key plots they needed were mysteriously disappearing from the market. "Who is this Blackwood?" Harding roared, slamming his fist on the table. "Find out everything you can about him." Sterling, ever the cool strategist, suggested they discreetly investigate. They hired a Pinkerton detective, a ruthless man named Silas, known for his ability to uncover secrets. Silas began sniffing around Dust Creek, asking questions, observing everyone. He quickly noticed the sudden arrival of Mr. Blackwood and the unusual amount of cash flowing through the land office. He also noticed Daisy Bell. Something about her quick wit and knowing glances made him suspicious. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he sensed she was involved somehow. He started following her, watching her every move, piecing together the puzzle. Meanwhile, the farmers were starting to feel a glimmer of hope. They didn't know who Mr. Blackwood was, but they saw that someone was fighting for them, driving up land prices and making it harder for the railroad to take their homes. But they also knew that Harding and Sterling wouldn't give up easily. The stakes were getting higher, and the danger was growing with each passing day. Daisy trusted Jebediah and Walks with the Wind with her life, or so she thought. Silas, the Pinkerton, was a master of manipulation. He'd been watching Jebediah, preying on his bitterness towards the railroad. He offered Jebediah a deal: information on Daisy in exchange for a hefty sum and a promise of a job with the railroad once the line was built. Jebediah, tempted by the money and the prospect of revenge, secretly agreed. He started feeding Silas information about Daisy's movements, her plans, and even her disguise as Mr. Blackwood. He justified his betrayal by telling himself he was only helping the railroad get what they wanted, and that Daisy was playing a dangerous game she couldn't win. Silas, armed with this knowledge, set a trap. He knew Daisy, as Mr. Blackwood, was planning to visit a remote water spring to secure water rights. He ambushed her on the way, revealing that he knew her secret. Daisy was stunned. She never suspected Jebediah would betray her. Now, her whole plan was in jeopardy, and her life was in danger. She had to think fast. Well, Daisy Bell, Silas sneered, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Or should I say, Mr. Blackwood? I must admit, it's a clever disguise. But it seems your little game is over. He gestured to two men who emerged from the rocks, both armed. Daisy knew she couldn't outrun them. She had to outsmart them. Silas, she said, her voice surprisingly calm. You think you've won, but you don't know the whole story. She subtly reached into her pocket, her fingers closing around a small, flat object. Before Silas could react, Daisy threw a handful of dirt into his face, blinding him momentarily. Then, with surprising speed, she kicked out, sending one of the armed men sprawling. She grabbed the other man's gun and pointed it at Silas. I have the ledgers, Silas, she said, her voice hard. I know about the water shortage, the false foreclosures, everything, and I'm not afraid to use it. Silas, wiping the dirt from his eyes, realized he'd underestimated her. You think those farmers will believe you? He scoffed. They'll side with the railroad, with progress. Maybe, Daisy said, but they'll also listen. And when they hear the truth, they'll have a choice to make. She knew this was her last chance. She had to get to town, expose Harding and Sterling, and rally the farmers to her side. But first, she had to escape Silas's trap. Daisy managed to escape Silas and his men, thanks to Walks with the Wind, who appeared seemingly out of nowhere and created a diversion. She raced back to Dust Creek, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She knew she had to act fast before Silas could alert Harding and Sterling. She burst into the Golden Nugget, startling the few patrons inside. Everyone, listen up, she shouted, her voice ringing with urgency. Harding and Sterling are planning to steal your land. They're going to cut off the water supply and force you to sell. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the saloon. Just then, Harding and Sterling strode in, Silas trailing behind them. Daisy Bell, Harding sneered, always stirring up trouble. Pay her no mind, folks. She's just trying to scare you. Daisy stood her ground. I have proof, she said, pulling out the copied pages from the ledgers. And I have something else you should know. I am Mr. Theodore Blackwood. She ripped off her fake mustache and spectacles, revealing her true identity. The crowd gasped. Harding and Sterling exchanged worried glances. It's true, Daisy continued. I bought up the land you need for your railroad. All of it. She paused for effect. And I'm not going to sell it to you. Unless you agree to my terms, Daisy continued, her eyes fixed on Harding and Sterling. First, you will pay every farmer in this town a fair price for their land, a price that reflects its true value, not some pittance you try to force them to accept. Harding sputtered. That's outrageous. We can't afford that. Then you don't get your railroad, Daisy said, her voice unwavering. Second, you'll guarantee their water rights in writing. No more tricks, no more shortages. They will have access to the water they need to survive. Sterling, realizing they were trapped, tried a different tactic. Daisy, be reasonable. We can work something out. A little something for you, perhaps. He winked, but Daisy wasn't swayed. Third, she said, ignoring Sterling, you will publicly apologize to the people of Dust Creek for trying to cheat them and promise to conduct your business honestly from now on. The crowd, emboldened by Daisy's bravery, began to murmur their support. Even Jebediah, ashamed of his betrayal, hung his head in guilt. Harding and Sterling, seeing the tide turning against them, reluctantly agreed. They knew they had no choice. Daisy had won, for now, but she knew that these men wouldn't let it go that easily. As soon as Harding and Sterling finished their forced apology, Daisy knew she had to leave. She wouldn't be safe in Dust Creek any longer. She gathered walks with the wind and, leaving a note for the farmers, slipped out of town under the cover of darkness. They didn't get far. Harding and Sterling, fueled by rage and desperation, sent Silas and a group of hired guns after them. A wild chase ensued across the desert, the sound of gunfire echoing through the canyons. Walks with the Wind used his knowledge of the terrain to guide them through hidden paths and treacherous canyons, but the pursuers were relentless. At one point, they were cornered on a narrow ridge. Daisy, armed with only a rifle, held them off while Walks with the Wind found a way to lower them down a steep cliff face using ropes he'd cleverly hidden. They rappelled down, narrowly escaping a hail of bullets. The chase led them through blinding sandstorms and across scorching salt flats. Daisy was exhausted, but she knew she couldn't give up. She had to protect the ledgers, the evidence that could bring Harding and Sterling down for good. She knew she had to reach a safe place, far from their reach, where she could expose their crimes to the authorities. The desert was unforgiving, but Daisy Bell was even tougher. Daisy and Walks with the Wind finally reached a larger town, where she contacted the authorities and shared the stolen ledgers. The evidence was irrefutable. Harding and Sterling were arrested, their railroad empire crumbling around them. Their scheme to defraud the farmers of Dust Creek was exposed to the world. News of Daisy's bravery and cunning spread like wildfire. The farmers of Dust Creek, now secure in their land and water rights, hailed her as a hero. They sent her letters of gratitude and gifts, thanking her for her courage and unwavering dedication. Jebediah, filled with remorse, wrote a heartfelt apology, which Daisy graciously accepted. Daisy didn't return to Dust Creek immediately. She knew that things would never be quite the same, but she eventually did go back, not as just a saloon girl, but as a respected member of the community, a symbol of hope and resilience. The Golden Nugget Saloon was still there, but now it had a new sign above the door, Daisy Bell's Place. It became a gathering place for the farmers, a place where they could share stories and celebrate their hard-won victory. And Daisy, with a twinkle in her eye, continued to pour drinks, listen closely, and watch over the town she had saved, always ready to outsmart anyone who threatened her community again. She proved that even the smallest person, with enough wit and courage, could stand up to the most powerful forces in the West.